A receptionist with a racist attitude mocked a black man the moment he stepped into the building's main lobby. Instead of being greeted as a respected guest, he was met with suspicious looks and insulting remarks. The receptionist refused to believe that the man standing before her was the CEO of the company. Even after he presented his ID, she ignored it and called security to deal with the intruder. However, when the manager arrived shortly after, the truth was revealed, leaving the entire room in utter silence. The shocking revelation not only rendered the receptionist speechless, but also forced everyone present to reflect on their attitudes. This is not just a story about patience and dignity, but a powerful wake-up call to reevaluate how we treat others and the unconscious biases we may hold. So, what happened next? What lessons were learned from this unexpected moment? Join us as we uncover this deeply emotional and meaningful story. But before we dive in, share where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to ensure you don't miss more inspiring stories like this one. The morning sunlight streamed through the large glass panels, illuminating the main lobby of the company, making it bright and modern. Michael Johnson walked in confidently, his polished leather shoes tapping lightly on the wooden floor, producing steady sounds. He was dressed in a dark, tailored suit that reflected the poise of someone accustomed to being in a position of leadership. Around him, the space was filled with the sounds of typing, hurried phone calls, and hushed work discussions. Everything seemed to flow in the rhythm of a typical workday. But for Michael, this was no ordinary morning. He was here to sign an important deal, an agreement that could shape the future of the company he had painstakingly built. As he approached the reception desk, Michael offered a faint smile, his eyes meeting those of the secretary seated behind the counter. Anna, a young woman with her hair tied neatly and dressed in stylish office attire, was engrossed in her computer screen. She didn't immediately notice Michael. When she heard his greeting, she looked up. Her gaze lingered on him for a split second before quickly changing. Instead of friendliness, her eyes glinted with suspicion. "Good morning," Michael said, his voice deep and polite. "I'm Michael Johnson. I have a meeting scheduled here this morning." Anna scrutinized him, her brows slightly furrowed. She didn't respond immediately, but instead gave him a once-over, as though trying to assess something about him. Michael remained still, maintaining his faint smile, but he could sense her skepticism. Anna lowered her head and glanced at the list on her computer screen, her fingers gliding swiftly over the keyboard. "I'm sorry, but I don't see your name on the guest list today," she said, her tone firm and devoid of warmth. Michael tilted his head slightly, still maintaining his composed demeanor. "I don't need to be on the list," he said. "I'm Michael Johnson, the founder and CEO of this company." His response caused Anna to pause for a second, but rather than expressing surprise or checking further, she let out a short, dry laugh. "CEO?" she repeated, her tone tinged with sarcasm. "I'm sorry, but you can't just say that and expect me to believe you." Michael did not lose his composure. Taking a deep breath, he calmly retrieved his wallet from his jacket pocket and produced his ID card. "This is my identification," he said, his tone steady. Anna glanced at the card, but made no effort to inspect it closely. Instead, she leaned back, folded her arms across her chest, and cast a glance toward the security office nearby. Picking up the intercom phone, she spoke with an urgency that barely masked her disdain. "Tom," she called, her voice brisk and detached. "Can you come up here? We have a situation that needs addressing." Michael stood silently, observing her. He could sense the contempt in her tone and actions. This wasn't new to him. Throughout his career, Michael had faced prejudice on numerous occasions, But for it to occur at the company he had founded was a bitter pill to swallow. A few minutes later, Tom, a security guard, emerged from the end of the hallway. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a black uniform, wearing a security badge on his chest. His stern expression conveyed the authority he was accustomed to wielding in his role. Following Anna's gesture, Tom approached Michael with deliberate, measured steps. "What seems to be the issue here?" Tom asked, his voice deep and slightly abrasive. "This man," Anna said, pointing at Michael, "claims to be the CEO of the company, but as you can see, that's rather hard to believe. I think you should verify him." Tom studied Michael from head to toe, his gaze filled with scrutiny. "I'll need to see some ID," he said curtly. Michael handed over his ID card again. Tom took it, gave it a cursory glance, and returned it with a smirk. "This card doesn't prove anything," Tom said, his tone laced with mockery. "You should leave before we have to take further action." Michael could feel frustration rising within him, but he restrained himself. He had no intention of creating a scene, especially when he knew this was more than just a misunderstanding. It was a glaring reflection of the biases he had encountered throughout his life. "You're making a serious mistake," he said, his tone calm yet firm. "I am the founder of this company, and I'm not going anywhere." Tom took a step closer, reducing the distance between them. "Listen, buddy," he said, his voice lower and menacingly. "I don't care who you say you are. If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police." Michael met Tom's gaze, his eyes sharp yet composed. "Call the police if you must," he replied. "I'll wait for them to arrive. But when the truth comes out, I'm not sure you'll be keeping your job." The tension in the lobby was palpable. Michael stood his ground, his gaze sweeping over the gathering crowd. Some looked on with curiosity, while most kept their distance, seemingly unwilling to get involved. However, one glance amidst the crowd caught Michael's attention, a young employee named Lisa. She stood partially hidden near a work desk, her eyes filled with worry. It was clear that she sensed something was amiss but lacked the courage to speak up. For a fleeting moment, Michael's eyes met Lisa's. There was something in her gaze, not indifference like the others, but unease and empathy. Even if it was a faint glimmer of hope, it was enough to bolster his patience in this ordeal. Anna, on the other hand, showed no signs of wavering. She folded her arms, her sharp gaze fixed on Michael. "I've already told you," she said, her voice cold and defiant. "Your name isn't on the list. And whether you claim to be the CEO or the president doesn't matter. Here, we follow procedures." Michael responded calmly. "Do your procedures include refusing to listen when there's a possibility you might be wrong?" His reply didn't faze Anna. She let out a short, hollow laugh filled with disdain. "Wrong? I don't think so. People who are genuinely in charge give advance notice or, at the very least, behave appropriately. But you're hardly the image of a CEO." Tom, standing beside Anna, clasped his hands in front of him, seemingly waiting for her cue. He glanced at Michael with a smirk. "I've dealt with plenty of people like you," Tom said bluntly, "claiming to be someone important. But when you dig deeper, they're always fakes." Michael kept his composure, though his eyes flashed with intensity. "I've shown you my ID. If you don't want to believe it, then call your supervisor to verify, or check the company records. I have nothing to hide." Anna didn't reply immediately. She turned toward Lisa, who was still standing silently in the corner, trying not to draw attention. "Lisa," Anna called out sharply, her authoritative tone slicing through the air. "You're new here, aren't you? You probably haven't encountered situations like this before. Consider this a lesson. Always follow protocol and don't let anyone bypass the rules without proper authorization." Lisa flinched, her hands tightening into fists at her sides. Her eyes darted quickly to Michael, then back down to the floor, avoiding his gaze. Michael noticed the tension in Lisa's body language. He could tell she sensed something was wrong, but fear and pressure from her superiors held her back. He didn't blame her. In the silence, he gave her a slight nod as if to say, "It's okay, I understand." At this point, Tom was growing visibly impatient. "Look, pal, stop wasting everyone's time," he said, stepping closer to Michael. "Either leave, or we'll call the police. Your choice." Michael took a deep breath, maintaining a steady tone. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm insisting that you call your manager. Right now." Anna exhaled sharply, her frustration evident. "Who do you think you are to make demands here?" she snapped. Turning to Tom, she gave him a clear nod. "Escort him out. Now." Tom moved forward, reaching out to grab Michael's arm. But before he could make contact, Michael's voice cut through the air, deliberate and commanding. "If you lay a hand on me, you will be held accountable. Let me be clear. This is my company. I'm not here to ask for permission. I am here to work." The room seemed to freeze. Employees standing nearby exchanged shocked glances, their faces a mix of astonishment and confusion. Lisa opened her mouth, slightly as if to say something, but quickly closed it again. She lowered her head, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Michael kept his gaze firmly locked on Tom and Anna, showing no signs of fear or surrender. He knew the truth would soon come to light. But in that moment, he realized something even more profound. The silence of those around him, especially those who knew he was being treated unjustly, was what hurt the most. Tom took another step forward, the distance between him and Michael now reduced to mere inches. Tom's large frame nearly blocked out the light from the overhead lamp, casting a shadow over Michael's composed face. His eyes glinted with disdain as he spoke in a dry, clipped tone. "Stop wasting my time. You're not supposed to be here. Leave now, or I'll have to use force." Michael held his gaze unwavering. "I've already told you. This is my company. If you don't believe me, call the manager. I'm not leaving until I finish my work." Michael's calm and resolute tone seemed to challenge Tom. "Your company?" Tom sneered, letting out a derisive chuckle. "Look at yourself. Who do you think you are?" Without waiting for a response, Tom reached out and grabbed Michael's arm, pulling him roughly. "Get out," he growled, his tone laced with aggression. Tom's actions caused Michael to stagger, but he quickly regained his balance. A flash of anger crossed his face as he clenched his fists at his sides. Yet he restrained himself. "Stay calm, Michael," he reminded himself silently. "Don't let your anger cloud your judgment." In that moment, a painful memory from years ago surged through Michael's mind like a tidal wave. He recalled being a young graduate, fresh out of college, searching for his first job. During an interview, the HR manager, unabashedly prejudiced, had told him bluntly, "You'll never succeed in this industry. We're looking for people with a more fitting image." That statement wasn't just a rejection. It left an indelible mark, carving a deep wound in his spirit, but the memory didn't weaken him. Instead, it steeled his resolve, reminding him that patience and persistence were his strongest weapons. He had overcome far greater obstacles to build this company from the ground up. A haughty security guard would not deter him. As Tom continued to tighten his grip on Michael's arm, a quiet, hesitant voice broke the tension in the lobby. "Does it have to be like this, Tom?" The voice belonged to Charlie, an elderly janitor. Charlie had been with the company since its earliest days and knew Michael's story well, from when the company was just a modest office to its transformation into a corporate powerhouse. Though Charlie had always kept to himself, never intervening in matters beyond his duties. This time he couldn't remain silent. Tom turned, glaring at Charlie. "What did you just say?" Tom's voice was tinged with intimidation. Charlie didn't respond immediately. He simply shook his head, his gaze filled with empathy as it landed on Michael. His gnarled hands gripped his mop tightly, as though trying to keep his emotions in check. "I just think we should be careful about how we treat others. Sometimes we don't realize the harm we're causing." Charlie's words brought a brief stillness to the lobby, as if the entire space paused to reflect. A few employees nearby exchanged glances, their faces a mix of surprise and curiosity, but none dared to speak up. Anna, standing close by, shattered the silence with an exasperated sigh. "Tom, don't pay attention to him. We have rules. Just do your job." Tom tightened his hold on Michael's arm one last time, shoving him back a few steps. Michael didn't resist. His piercing gaze met Tom's, but his voice remained unnervingly calm. "You're making a big mistake. One I think you'll come to regret." From afar, Charlie watched the scene unfold, his expression a mixture of worry and helplessness. Though he wanted to say more, his age and position made him hesitant to overstep his boundaries. Michael turned his head, his eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. Lisa, still standing in the corner, clutched her hands tightly as though trying to muster the courage, but her eyes avoided him when they met. Michael didn't hold it against her. He understood that the silence of people like Lisa and the tacit complicity of those like Anna represented the core of the problem he was confronting. Inside Michael, a flame burned quietly. It wasn't the flame of momentary anger, but of steadfast determination, a resolve not to let anyone diminish his worth or the legacy he had built. This time, he wouldn't let silence be the answer. Michael straightened his posture, adjusting the hem of his suit jacket, which had been disrupted by Tom's forceful shove. He took a deep breath, his eyes briefly betraying a flicker of emotion before returning to their steady calm. At that moment, the phone in his pocket vibrated. Michael retrieved it, glancing at the screen. The name Emily, his longtime and trusted assistant, appeared. He cast a quick look at Anna and Tom, who remained stationed at the reception area, their expressions still filled with suspicion and vigilance. Turning away, Michael walked a few steps toward the large lobby window and answered the call in a low voice to avoid drawing further attention. "Hello, Emily," he said, his tone calm as he tried to project an air of normalcy. "Hello, Mr. Johnson." Emily's voice came through, urgent but laced with concern. "Where are you? The meeting with the partners is starting in 10 minutes and they've been asking why you're not there yet. This deal is a big one, you know." Michael closed his eyes briefly, suppressing a surge of frustration. He understood the pressure Emily was under, as well as the partner's impatience. But how could he explain that, at his own company, he was being blocked from entering the building? "I've run into a little trouble," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Just keep them there. I'll get there as soon as I can." "Trouble?" Emily's voice turned skeptical. "What's going on? Do you need me to come down?" "No, that won't be necessary," Michael replied, his tone weighted but steady. "Just focus on keeping the meeting stable. I'll handle this." Emily paused for a few seconds, as though she wanted to press further, but finally said, "All right, but please, hurry. The partners don't look happy." Michael ended the call, gripping the phone tightly in his hand for a moment before tucking it back into his pocket. His gaze drifted out the window, through the clear glass that framed the bustling city bathed in morning light. His thoughts revolved around the contract he was set to sign, a multi-million-dollar deal that would not only expand the company's reach internationally, but also solidify his position. Yet all of that seemed to hang in the balance, stalled by the small-mindedness and arrogance of a few individuals. Meanwhile, in the upstairs conference room, tension was building. The partner, William Grant, a seasoned businessman with a stern demeanor, glanced at his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Seated at the head of the table, surrounded by his associates and a few of Michael's team members, William's furrowed brow betrayed his growing displeasure. Each time he looked toward the door, his expression hardened further. Emily, seated in a corner of the room, worked hard to maintain a positive atmosphere. She flashed a polite smile and addressed William. "Mr. Johnson just called to let us know he's on his way. He may have been delayed by an unexpected matter." William raised an eyebrow, his sharp eyes fixed on Emily. "An unexpected matter more important than this meeting?" he said, his tone even but loaded with implication. "We've spent a week preparing for this. Frankly, I don't find such tardiness reassuring for a reliable partnership." William's remark felt like a blow, and Emily found herself backed into a corner. She nodded slightly, attempting to reassure him. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Grant, but I assure you, Mr. Johnson holds this partnership in the highest regard. He'll be here very shortly." William didn't reply immediately, but his stern gaze filled the room with a heavy silence. Back in the lobby, Michael turned to face Anna and Tom once again. He knew time was running out, and the partner's patience was wearing thin. Yet, rather than rushing, he maintained his measured tone and fixed his eyes on Anna. "I don't have time to waste. Call your manager down here right now. If you don't, I'll do it myself." Anna folded her arms, her face icy. "I told you already, you need to leave. We're not obligated to follow the orders of someone who simply claims to be the CEO. Tom, standing beside her, remained in a defensive stance, his expression full of defiance. "You think you have the right to give orders here? If you don't leave now, I'm calling the police." Michael didn't respond immediately. He stepped closer, his eyes locked onto Tom's. When he spoke, his voice was low and deliberate. "Go ahead. Call them. I'd love to hear how you'll explain ejecting the CEO of this company from his building." For a moment, both Anna and Tom froze, stunned by Michael's confidence. But rather than backing down, Anna pulled out her phone, dialed a number, and said, "Let's see who's right then." Michael stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. Though the delays and indignities tested his patience, his determination to uphold his dignity and principles never wavered. This confrontation was no longer just about him. It was about standing firm for the values he had spent a lifetime defending. Michael stood still, his gaze calm but piercing, fixed on Anna and Tom. The tension in the lobby was palpable, like an invisible current making everyone around feel uneasy. Anna put her phone down after ending the call. She turned back to face Michael, her expression cold and laced with defiance. "I've called the manager," she said, her voice steady and deliberate. "They will handle this situation shortly. For now, I suggest you leave." Lisa, who had been observing the entire ordeal from behind the desk, felt a growing sense of unease. As a new employee, unfamiliar with most people in the company, her instincts told her something was off. From the way Michael spoke, his calm demeanor, and his confident bearing, Lisa felt he might indeed be who he claimed to be, Michael Johnson, the CEO of the company. "Anna," Lisa spoke up, her voice soft but clear. "Maybe we should double-check. I mean, if he's telling the truth, this could cause serious trouble." All we need to do is check the company records or call HR directly. It wouldn't take long." Anna spun around, her sharp gaze like a blade aimed at Lisa. "Lisa, you're new here, aren't you?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Without waiting for an answer, Anna continued, "Let me teach you something. In this job, we don't trust anyone based solely on their word. A man claiming to be the CEO but not on the list? That's ridiculous." Lisa swallowed hard, clenching her hands by her sides. "But I don't think he looks like a fraud," she managed to say, her voice tinged with hesitation. "Doesn't look like one?" Anna raised an eyebrow, her eyes gleaming with mockery. "Lisa, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Look at him. Does he seem like a real CEO to you? People like him, they don't have the aura of leadership." Standing just a few steps away, Michael heard every word Anna said. He remained silent, but his gaze hardened, a mix of disappointment and determination glinting in his eyes. Anna's words were not merely dismissive of him. They were a reflection of deeply ingrained societal biases he had spent his entire life fighting against. Lisa turned to look at Michael. In her eyes, he could see hesitation but also a faint glimmer of hope. She seemed to be wrestling with her conscience, torn between following Anna's orders and doing what she felt was right. Finally, after a few seconds of silence, Lisa picked up her phone and moved to a secluded corner. Quickly, she dialed a number and brought the phone to her ear. "Hello," she said softly, her voice trembling. "This is Lisa from the reception desk. I need to verify something. Is Michael Johnson the CEO of our company?" On the other end, a voice responded with surprise. "Yes, Mr. Johnson is the CEO. Is there a problem?" Lisa's heart raced, a mix of relief and apprehension coursing through her. She glanced toward Anna, who still stood firmly in front of Michael with an unyielding expression. Lisa didn't know what to do next. Revealing the truth now could earn her reprimand, but staying silent would only make her feel guiltier. "No problem," Lisa quickly replied to the voice on the line. "I just wanted to confirm. Thank you." Ending the call, Lisa stood frozen for a moment, trying to steady her nerves. Her eyes darted to Michael, who remained motionless, like a steadfast lighthouse amid a storm. Lisa decided to wait for the manager to arrive to resolve the situation, but she knew the truth was about to come to light, and Anna would have to face the consequences of her arrogance. Meanwhile, Anna maintained her stance, showing no signs of wavering. She turned to Tom, giving him a quick nod. "We don't have time to waste. If he keeps causing trouble, escort him out." Tom looked at Michael, his expression as rigid as a wall. "You've heard her. This is your last chance." Michael didn't respond, but his gaze shifted quietly toward Lisa. He had seen her make the call, and he sensed she was trying to do the right thing. In that moment, he felt no anger toward her silence. He only hoped she would find the courage to speak up, even just once. In the corner, Lisa gripped her phone tightly, her mind in turmoil. She knew the truth was clear now, but the tense atmosphere of the confrontation made it difficult for her to speak. She could only hope the truth would reveal itself before the situation spiraled further out of control. Anna cast a sharp glance at Michael, her gaze icy and filled with defiance. His calm composure only seemed to provoke her further. Without hesitation, she grabbed the phone on the reception desk and swiftly dialed an emergency number. "Hello, police," Anna said, her voice professional but tinged with theatrical urgency. "We have a man causing a disturbance in our office. He's claiming to be the CEO but has no valid identification. I need you to come and handle this immediately." Michael stood motionless, his eyes fixed on Anna. He realized she had escalated the situation to a whole new level. At that moment, he caught a glimpse of Lisa behind the reception desk. Her face was pale, and it was evident she disagreed with Anna's actions but didn't know how to stop her. About 10 minutes later, 2 police officers entered the lobby. Officer James, a middle-aged man with a sturdy build, led the way. Behind him was Officer Kelly, a younger woman with sharp, steady eyes. Their presence immediately heightened the tension in the room. James approached the reception desk, briefly glancing at Michael before addressing Anna. "Who made the call?" he asked, his voice deep and authoritative. "I did," Anna quickly replied, pointing toward Michael. "This man refuses to leave and is claiming to be the CEO of the company. We've asked him to leave, but he won't cooperate." Michael raised an eyebrow, a fleeting sense of helplessness crossing his mind. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I'm Michael Johnson," he said, his voice slow but clear. "I'm not claiming anything. I am the founder and CEO of this company. They've refused to verify my identity and are trying to force me out." James scrutinized Michael from head to toe, his expression hinting at doubt. "Do you have any ID?" he asked. Michael calmly retrieved his ID from his pocket and handed it to James. The officer examined it briefly before looking back at Michael. "This appears to be valid, but I can't confirm for sure. Is there a way to verify this?" Anna stepped forward, her tone filled with impatience. "He could have forged anything," she said quickly. "We can't trust a card alone." Lisa, standing silently in the background, felt her hands tremble. She wanted to speak up and reveal the truth, that she had already confirmed Michael's identity, but Anna's intimidating demeanor kept her from doing so. "You can call a senior manager or check the company records," Michael said, his voice steady. "I've suggested this from the start, but she refused." Officer Kelly, who had remained quiet until now, spoke up. "Can we verify this information through company records? If he is indeed the CEO, it should be confirmed easily." Anna shook her head, her eyes flashing with determination. "There's no need. I'm certain he's an imposter. It's absurd to think a CEO would show up unannounced with nothing but a flimsy story and an ID card." James glanced at Kelly, then turned back to Michael. "We'll check to verify, but if you're not who you claim to be, you could face charges for trespassing. Do you agree?" "Absolutely," Michael replied firmly. "I have nothing to hide." Kelly pulled out her phone and called the company's administrative department to verify the information. Meanwhile, James stood firm, his sharp eyes never leaving Michael. Anna crossed her arms, a smug expression on her face as if she was confident the outcome would favor her. Minutes passed, and the tension in the lobby grew heavier. Lisa stood in the corner, her eyes darting between Michael and the officers. Her heart pounded as she anticipated the truth being revealed, though she feared Anna might blame her for not following protocol. Finally, Officer Kelly nodded as she ended the call. She turned to James, then fixed her gaze on Anna. "The information has been confirmed. Mr. Michael Johnson is indeed the CEO of this company." Kelly's words landed like a lightning strike in the silent room. Anna's eyes widened, her face going pale. "What?" she stammered, her voice losing its earlier confidence. "That can't be." Michael, still standing firm, allowed a faint, meaningful smile to cross his lips. He didn't speak, merely holding Anna's gaze, letting her feel the weight of her mistake. James handed Michael's ID back to him, nodding lightly as a gesture of apology. "Sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Johnson. We were just acting on the information we were given." "No harm done," Michael replied, his voice calm but carrying a note of gravity. "But I hope that next time you'll listen more carefully before making judgments." The officers exited, leaving a heavy atmosphere in their wake. Anna stood frozen, her expression stiff, while Lisa looked down, unable to meet Michael's eyes. Every gaze in the room turned toward Michael, who had weathered the ordeal without losing his composure or dignity. The atmosphere in the lobby was taut, like a string about to snap. After the police left, the employees nearby began murmuring among themselves, their eyes shifting between Michael, Anna, and Tom. Though no one dared to speak aloud, discomfort and confusion were etched onto their faces. Michael stood his ground, his sharp gaze fixed on Anna and Tom. Anna, who had just received confirmation from the police that Michael was indeed the CEO, was frozen in place. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly as they rested against her chest. Tom, who had been so assertive moments ago, was equally shaken. His confidence and defiant posture had evaporated, leaving him awkward and visibly embarrassed. The heavy silence was broken by the sharp click of polished shoes against the floor. A tall man with salt and pepper hair entered the lobby. It was Richard, a senior manager at the company, respected by employees for his sharp mind and composed demeanor. Richard adjusted his tie as he walked in, but his expression changed the moment his eyes met Michael's. "Oh no," he exclaimed, quickly striding forward. "Mr. Johnson, what's going on here?" Michael, maintaining his remarkable composure, turned to Richard. "That's what I'd like to know, Richard. It seems your staff doesn't believe I'm worthy of entering my own company." As Michael's words landed, Richard whipped around to face Anna and Tom, his piercing gaze making them both lower their heads in shame. "What is this about?" Richard demanded, his voice tight with restrained anger. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Anna tried to speak, but her voice wavered so much that her words were barely audible. I didn't know. I just thought." "Thought what?" Richard interrupted, his tone cold and cutting. "You thought a CEO couldn't walk into their own company without your permission? Or did you think insulting and obstructing him was an acceptable way to treat the highest leader here?" Tom took a step back, as though trying to distance himself from Richard's scathing glare. But Richard wasn't about to let him off the hook. "And you," he said, his voice growing sharper, "I've always trusted the professionalism of the security team. But manhandling the CEO and forcing him out of the lobby, this is your idea of professionalism?" Tom lowered his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know. I thought." "Exactly, you thought," Richard said, emphasizing the word. "The problem is that both of you acted on assumptions instead of verifying the facts. You let your biases dictate your actions without even considering the consequences." Lisa, standing behind the reception desk, exhaled deeply in relief. The truth was finally out, but she still felt the weight of guilt over how Anna and Tom had treated Michael. Though she hadn't been directly involved, Lisa couldn't shake the shame of not speaking up strongly enough to prevent the misconduct. Richard turned back to Michael, his expression softening but still carrying an air of regret. "Mr. Johnson, I offer my deepest apologies for everything that has occurred. This is entirely my fault for not ensuring the staff understood your role and treated you with the respect you deserve." Michael gave a small nod, his voice low but tinged with disappointment. "I don't need a personal apology, Richard. What I need is for you to understand that what happened here isn't just a simple misunderstanding. It's a symptom of a deeper problem." Richard nodded solemnly, his eyes reflecting his understanding of the gravity of the situation. "You're right, and I will ensure this issue is addressed thoroughly. No one in this company, from the reception desk to the management, has the right to act based on prejudice like this." Anna, standing nearby, finally found her voice. I "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Johnson. I didn't realize." Michael turned to look at Anna, his gaze steady but weighted with meaning. "You didn't realize because you didn't want to realize," he said. "Instead of listening, you chose to judge. But I hope you'll learn from this mistake." Anna's head drooped, her face flushed with embarrassment. Tom, standing beside her, remained silent, unable to meet Michael's eyes. Richard sighed, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Everyone, return to your work," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority. "And remember, professionalism isn't just about skills. It's about how we treat others." As Michael walked across the lobby toward the elevator, the space behind him filled with murmurs. Office employees, from those near the reception desk to others peeking out from behind workstations, began whispering. "Is he the CEO?" a surprised female voice asked. "Definitely," another voice replied. The police and Richard both confirmed it. "There's no mistake." Many employees bowed their heads, pretending to focus on their work, but their eyes trailed after Michael. Some looked ashamed, particularly those who had stood nearby and witnessed the entire incident without intervening. They knew they should have spoken up, but instead chose silence or passive observation, complicit in Anna and Tom's misconduct. In the corner of the lobby, Sarah, a veteran employee of the company, sat at her desk. Having worked there for nearly a decade, Sarah knew Michael well, not just as the founder, but as a leader who always prioritized human values. When Sarah heard about the morning's incident, a deep sense of guilt weighed on her. Seeing Michael walk past, Sarah stood abruptly, as though unable to remain seated any longer. She quickly approached him, bowing her head slightly as she spoke with genuine emotion. "Mr. Johnson, I'm so sorry." Michael stopped, lifting his head to look at Sarah. She appeared flustered, but her eyes were filled with sincerity. "I wasn't directly involved in what happened," Sarah continued, "but I stood there and did nothing. I saw it all, yet I didn't dare to speak up. I'm deeply ashamed." Sarah's words shifted the atmosphere in the room. The murmurs faded as all eyes turned toward her. Some employees began staring at their hands. Others avoided Michael's gaze altogether. Michael regarded Sarah for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Silence is also a form of action, but what matters is that you've recognized it. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it to act better in the future." His words rippled through the room like a wave. Some employees exchanged glances, questioning why they hadn't been as courageous as Sarah. Others began whispering defensively to justify their inaction. "I didn't know who he was either," someone murmured. "How could anyone know?" "It's not our responsibility to jump into situations like that," another replied, their tone defensive. Sarah turned to face her colleagues, her gaze sweeping across each face. "We all knew what was right," she said, her voice clear, "but we chose to do nothing. Stop making excuses. This is a lesson for all of us." Her words left the room in silence. Instead of continuing their chatter or shifting blame, the employees began to feel the weight of what had just transpired. They hadn't just witnessed wrongdoing. They had failed to seize the opportunity to do what was right. Standing amidst the quiet room, Michael surveyed the employees one last time. He didn't need to say more. His expression conveyed everything. As he stepped into the elevator, Sarah watched him with a determined look in her eyes. Though unspoken, she knew today would mark a turning point in how she and her colleagues approached similar situations in the future. As the elevator doors closed, Michael abruptly pressed the stop button. He turned around, his gaze sweeping across everyone in the lobby. The already quiet space grew even tenser. as though everyone instinctively understood that Michael was about to say something important. Some employees looked at him with apprehension, while others bowed their heads, unable to meet his eyes. Michael stepped out of the elevator, standing in the middle of the lobby. He took a deep breath. He didn't need to speak, but he knew this was an opportunity to deliver a larger message, not just to those present, but to reaffirm the values of the company he had worked so hard to build. "Everyone," Michael began, his voice warm but resonant. "I know today isn't just another day. What happened here isn't just a minor incident, and it doesn't just affect me personally. It's a symptom of a much larger issue, one we must confront as a community and as a society." He paused, letting his eyes meet those of the people listening. "I am not angry. I'm not here to reprimand anyone. But I want you to think about one question. Why did this happen?" A prolonged silence followed, as though Michael's question had struck a deep chord in everyone. He continued, his voice deliberate and filled with emotion. "We live in a world where people are often judged, not by their abilities or character, but by preconceived notions about appearance, background, or the roles we think they are suited to play. But what are these biases, if not the limitations we impose on ourselves? Today, I wasn't judged for who I am, but for not looking like who some people thought I should be." Anna, standing by the reception desk, kept her gaze fixed on the floor. Tom stepped back, seemingly wishing to disappear from Michael's view. Lisa, however, stood upright, her expression a mixture of regret and quiet empathy. Michael's voice grew steadier. "I'm not saying this to shame anyone. I'm saying it so we can face this issue together. Fairness isn't some distant ideal. It's something we must practice daily, in the way we speak to each other, the way we treat one another, and the way we evaluate people we don't yet know." He paused again, allowing his words to settle into the room's atmosphere. "I have spent my life building this company, not just to generate profits, but to create an environment where people are valued for who they truly are. Yet today, I find myself questioning, are we living up to those values?" Michael's words felt like a heavy blow to everyone present. Employees who had previously believed the situation didn't concern them now felt the weight of his message. He turned his gaze to Lisa, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Lisa," he said, his voice full of meaning. "You've shown that even in silence, there can be empathy. I hope that next time you'll find the strength to speak up for what you know is right." Lisa nodded, her eyes shimmering with tears. Finally, Michael surveyed the room, his tone deepening but remaining resolute. "What happened today isn't just my story. It's a story about all of us, about how we see and treat one another. I hope that from this moment forward, we will not only do better in our work, but also strive to be fairer and kinder human beings." Do you agree with Michael's perspective that prejudice is a limitation we impose on ourselves? In your own life, have you ever faced a similar situation? And how did you overcome prejudice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. He stepped back into the elevator, but this time the atmosphere wasn't as heavy as before. His words had left a profound mark, sparking a quiet awakening. As the elevator doors closed, the lobby remained silent. Not with complicity, but with reflection and a sense of change. Anna and Tom avoided looking at each other. Sarah sat at her desk, gripping its edge tightly. Lisa stood still, feeling a faint glimmer of hope within her. This wasn't just a tense day, it was the start of something better. As the elevator doors closed, the atmosphere in the lobby remained heavy with the weight of Michael's profound words. Silence lingered like a thick veil draped over the space. A few employees bowed their heads, trying to return to their tasks, but their eyes continued to dart toward Anna and Tom, both standing frozen, as if paralyzed by shame. Anna, who had always carried herself with confidence and conviction, now struggled to hide her unease. Her face was pale, her gaze distant, as if she were trying to make sense of what she had just done. Tom, who had earlier exuded authority, now stood near the security desk, his hand gripping his belt tightly, his shoulders slumped. After a long pause, Anna took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage to break free from her silence. She turned her head toward the elevator where Michael had just left. Then, without hesitation, she stepped forward, her trembling but clear voice echoing in the space. "Everyone, I need to say this in front of you all." People stopped, their curiosity holding them in rapt attention. Tom lifted his head to look at Anna, surprised by her determination, and then stepped forward to stand beside her. "Mr. Johnson was right," Anna began, her voice slow but firm. "I was wrong. Not just because I failed to recognize him as our CEO, but because I let prejudice guide my actions. I didn't verify carefully, and I didn't listen to him. Instead, I allowed my narrow thoughts to lead me." She turned to her colleagues, her eyes reflecting genuine remorse. "Perhaps I'm not the only one here who has ever done this, but what I'm most ashamed of is not realizing how long I've carried these prejudices, and today they caused a serious mistake." Tom stepped forward at this moment, his voice steady but soft. "I also want to apologize," he said, his tone laced with regret. "I acted rudely, not just out of duty, but because I was too quick to judge Mr. Johnson based solely on appearances. I know I have no excuse for that." Anna nodded, her gaze sweeping the room. "I know our apologies can't change what happened," she continued, "but I hope that everyone here, including myself, can learn from this mistake. It's a painful lesson, but a necessary one." At this moment, all eyes in the lobby were on Anna and Tom. A few employees quietly nodded, recognizing the sincerity in their words. As Michael re-entered the lobby from the elevator, perhaps because he had forgotten something or simply wanted to observe further, Anna immediately stepped forward with Tom following closely behind. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice clearer now but still carrying a deep sense of regret, "I want to apologize to you, in front of everyone." Michael stopped, his eyes meeting hers without revealing his emotions. Anna continued, "What I did not only insulted you but also harmed the values this company stands for. I understand now that I need to change, and I am genuinely committed to doing so." Tom stood beside her, his head bowed. "I'm sorry too, Mr. Johnson," he said. "I don't know what else to say other than to admit I was wrong." Michael remained silent for a few moments, seemingly ensuring that their words were not just hasty defenses. Finally, he gave a small nod. "I accept your apologies," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "But apologies aren't enough. What's more important is that you reflect deeply on what happened, not just today, but on how you perceive and treat others moving forward." His words made both Anna and Tom bow their heads once more. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson," Anna said quietly. "I will not forget this lesson." Michael nodded slightly and then turned to address the other employees in the lobby. "I hope all of us take something away from this incident. Every action we take creates an environment, a workplace that can either be fair or filled with prejudice. Which one it becomes is entirely up to us." With that, he walked away, leaving behind a lobby heavy with meaning, yet filled with a newfound sense of purpose. The employees in the room said nothing, but deep in their hearts they all knew that a change, however small, had begun that day. 2 days after the lobby incident, Michael called a company-wide meeting. The main conference hall was meticulously prepared, and all employees, from senior management to security staff, were required to attend. The atmosphere in the room carried a hint of tension, but it was also charged with anticipation. Everyone understood that this meeting would mark a significant milestone, not just for the company, but for each individual within it. Michael stepped onto the stage with his usual calm demeanor, but today his eyes held a resolute determination. Standing tall, he surveyed the room, meeting the gaze of the hundreds of employees watching him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice strong yet warm. "As you may know, 2 days ago, an incident occurred in the company lobby. I won't revisit the details because that's not the purpose of this meeting. Instead, I want us to reflect on what we can learn from it, not just as a company, but as individuals." He paced slowly, his hands clasped together. That incident was not just a personal mistake. It was a manifestation of deep-seated biases that we sometimes don't realize we carry. But I believe we can change, and we must change. Michael paused, his gaze softening. "So, today, I'm announcing that starting next month, we will launch a comprehensive diversity and equity training program. Every employee, regardless of position or rank, will participate. This is not just another procedural requirement. It is a commitment to creating an environment where everyone is recognized and respected for who they truly are." Michael's announcement was met with a moment of stunned silence. Then, a few claps began, slowly building into a wave of applause that filled the room. While some people initially hesitated, the sincerity and determination in Michael's words compelled them to join in. Raising his hand to quiet the room, Michael continued, "I also want to extend a special thanks to one employee who dared to do the right thing under difficult circumstances. Lisa, could you stand up?" Lisa, seated near the back, blushed with surprise, but stood. All eyes turned to her. A few hesitant claps broke out, growing into hearty applause as Michael went on. "Lisa made an effort to help me when no one else dared to speak up. Though she couldn't do everything perfectly, her small action was a big step, and that's something we should all strive to emulate." Lisa bowed her head in gratitude, her eyes shining with emotion. As she sat down, those around her nodded in encouragement, whispering words of praise for her bravery. Michael's gesture not only uplifted Lisa, but also inspired others to reflect on their own choices and find courage in future challenges. Michael concluded his speech with a profound message. A company's success isn't measured solely by profit or reputation, but by how we treat each other. I hope that, starting today, each of us will not only be part of a great organization, but also part of a positive change in society. As he stepped off the stage, the entire room stood in applause. The initial tension of the meeting had transformed into unity and determination. Employees left the room with renewed hope and resolve, ready to begin a new chapter for the company. At the back of the room, Anna and Tom remained standing, not yet joining the flow of departing employees. Anna turned to Tom and sighed. "Do you think we'll do better?" she asked, her voice soft but sincere. Tom nodded, his eyes contemplative. "I think we don't have a choice, Anna, but I believe we can change." Anna nodded, her gaze following the path where Michael had exited. "He's not just a great CEO, he's a true leader. I think this is the first time I've truly understood that." Tom didn't respond, but his silence carried agreement. Together, they walked out of the room, carrying a renewed sense of responsibility and the chance to make amends. The meeting ended, and a refreshing breeze seemed to sweep through the company. Employees dispersed, but instead of the usual indifference, they engaged in conversations about what had just transpired. These discussions were no longer limited to work matters. They now touched on fairness and how each person could contribute to fostering a better environment. Michael walked slowly through the long hallway leading to the exit, his hands tucked into the pockets of his suit jacket, his expression thoughtful. All eyes followed him as he passed by. No one dared to speak, but their respect was evident in their gaze. Though Michael didn't stop, he could feel the change, a small yet profound shift beginning to take root. At the reception desk, Anna and Tom stood side by side, still dressed in their tidy uniforms, but without the rigid confidence they once carried. As Michael walked by, Anna lifted her head, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson." Michael paused, turning to look at them. "I don't need your thanks," he said, his voice warm yet weighty. "I need to see change, not just from the two of you, but from everyone in this company." Anna bowed her head, her eyes reflecting genuine remorse. Tom stood still, offering a slight nod as if silently vowing to make amends. In a shadowed corner near the exit, Charlie, the janitor, leaned quietly on his broom. From the very beginning of the incident 2 days ago, he had observed everything, missing not a single detail. As Michael neared the door, Charlie offered a small smile, his eyes filled with an admiration that words couldn't fully express. "You kept your dignity, Mr. Johnson," Charlie said softly, just loud enough for Michael to hear as he passed. "And in doing so, you helped us keep ours too." Michael stopped, turning to face Charlie. A gentle smile crossed his face, not a smile of triumph, but one of empathy. "Thank you, Charlie," Michael replied, his voice warm. "Sometimes change begins with the smallest of actions." Charlie nodded, his gaze following Michael as he walked out through the main doors. Outside the office building, the afternoon light reflected off the modern facade, casting a gleaming image of a corporate powerhouse. Michael descended the steps slowly, each stride imbued with a sense of relief. Though the day had begun with insult and misunderstanding, it had concluded with a significant lesson, not just for the company but for himself as well. Looking up at the building, Michael wasn't thinking about material achievements or the major contracts awaiting him. Instead, he thought of the people inside, those he had fought not to command but to lead. He knew change wouldn't come overnight, but what had just unfolded was a first step, a seed for a fairer and better future. Inside the building, Charlie glanced out through the glass, watching Michael walk away with a serene demeanor. He smiled, feeling a quiet pride. Over the years he had worked there, Charlie had seen many people come and go, but rarely had he encountered a leader like Michael, a man who not only inspired but also made others recognize their worth. Charlie bent down and resumed his work, but within him rose a profound sense of satisfaction. He knew that today was no ordinary day. It was the day that change had truly begun, and he was proud to be a small part of that story. Michael walked away, but his words and actions continued to echo in the space he left behind. This was not just a story about confronting prejudice. It was a powerful reminder that change starts with the smallest actions. From a heartfelt apology to the courage to speak up and the determination to stand firm. Today's story isn't just about one man's resilience and dignity. It's a profound lesson about prejudice and how we treat one another in life. What are your thoughts on how Michael handled this situation? If you were in his shoes, would you have been able to maintain the same calm and dignity? Share your opinions in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like and share it to spread the message, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.